Corporate America seems to be taking a closer look at racial equality and inequality in the workplace, and a lot of corporations are rolling out commitments to do better. But we've seen this happen before. So the real question is, what is going to lead to lasting change? I want to bring in Eddie Brown. Eddie Brown, you are the founder and CEO of Brown Capital Management, and you wrote a really interesting op-ed entitled, "I'm a Black CEO. I've been discounted on Wall Street because of the color of my skin." It's in the Washington Post, and it's a great op-ed. So I want to ask you, listen, you grew up in the Jim Crow South. Now your firm manages, you say, $14 billion in client assets. You're winning. You are an example of what the American dream is supposed to be about. You didn't have to write this op-ed. What compelled you to?
We have been low profile, Brown Capital Management, but with what's going on in this country, we said we have a lot of good growth built up over the last 37 years, a great performance track record as an investment firm, and no blemishes in the whole 37 years. So I said, let's draw down on some of that goodwill, kind of, if not now, when? So we said this is a time in this country where those of us who have been fortunate to achieve, but we have faced a lot of things as many of our brethren have faced. So let us speak out. And that's what prompted it. It's time.
So, Mr. Brown, it's such an interesting op-ed, and I want to get your take on something that you often hear when we discuss politics. People will often say, at least up before the period that we're living in now, they'll say, why are you talking about racism? We had an African-American president. We had Barack Obama, who became president of the United States. There were some, I spent close to 20 years on Wall Street myself, where there were people who would say to me, look at Stanley O'Neill, who used to run Merrill Lynch. Look at Ken Chenault, who ran American Express. They will point to Black African-American CEOs and say, it can't be what you're saying, because these individuals have risen to the very, very top of their professions, where they're responsible for managing thousands of employees and billions of dollars in management. Explain why there's a disconnect between that reality and the truth.
Well, the truth is, it's just so few. 5 of the Fortune 500 companies have African-American CEOs. That's a very small percentage. And when you look at the capabilities of many Blacks in corporate America and on Wall Street, it's just a pity that so few, and yes, you can pick those 5 or you can pick others, like myself, but it's just a tiny percentage of what's available out there.
Mm-hmm. In your op-ed, you point to the fact that we have seen these sort of pledges from corporations before, and they may put together an office for minority advancement or something or other, and then but it doesn't seem to really eventually turn into any sort of cultural or systemic change within these companies. And you talk about how the role of managers is sort of downplayed in favor of sort of arguing about the talent of said minority. There's difficulty finding talented people out there. Can you kind of flesh that out a little bit?
Yeah, that's the common refrain, in corporate America. Say when I started Brown Capital Management 37 years ago, there were very few African Americans in this business, and especially heads of investment management firms. So we set a goal from day one to actually have a diverse firm at all levels. So the common refrain is, I can't find the talent, Black talent. Well, you have to go look for it. And we made a concerted effort to go look for it. And we made sure that we were diverse across the whole firm, and that's still the case today. So you have to have a commitment.
So here's another question I think would be interesting and illuminating for our viewers. How difficult is it to do what you did, Mr. Brown, which is to say, much as many other ethnic groups at the turn of the 19th century into the 20th century did, which is to say, look, we're not getting our opportunities because we're waiting or hoping that things will change from the individuals and the organizations that currently exist. So I'm going to do my own thing. I wonder if you could just sort of take us through your mindset when you decided to start your own company, which has grown to be very, very successful, and the challenges that you face. And do you believe that people would face those same challenges, if perhaps not more, in 2020 to try and attempt what you did?
Yeah, well, the big thing is preparation. Preparation educationally. So in this money management business, kind of a master's in business administration, MBA is kind of the minimum credential among others. And you have to have experience. And so the big question is, how do you get experience if no one will give you a shot? So that's kind of the problem to figure out. And then, of course, they have enough capital to be able to survive for enough time for the idea to work. So this idea of entrepreneurship is alive and well. Many people don't have the risk profile or the risk tolerance to be able to do it. But if you put all of the pieces together, the right educational background, the right talent accumulation to do it, and the risk tolerance to do it, it can be done. So, entrepreneurship is alive and well. It's an important part of building this country. And I think it's very important in terms of African Americans moving forward and accumulating wealth. The big thing.
I want to go back.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
No,
go ahead. Complete your thought.
Is kind of what I call the rocket fuel of wealth creation is equity ownership. And that's sorely lacking in big percentages in corporate America. And at Brown Capital, we made sure that all of our employees have equity ownership in the firm. And it does build wealth over time. That's the rocket fuel.
I think that is a very good point from my kind of limited knowledge of law firms and people sort of getting to the point where they become partners. At times, the qualifications are particularly difficult for minority candidates to attain because they don't come from, a background where they went to private schools and there are these personal relationships that they've been building up over the years. But I wanted to ask you a question that kind of piggybacked on what Vlad had asked you, identifying the fact that, we have seen presidents that are visible minorities and are African American. We've seen vice presidents in companies, but somehow their presence doesn't always trickle down to a cultural change within the entire company. But it sure looks good when you go to that company's website and they have a list of all their CEOs and it looks like they're being proactive. Explain to me why you can have, visible minorities, women, Black people, other people, in sort of the corner offices, but still can't change the culture within the company.
Yeah, an important factor, whether it's in the money management business, decisions are made kind of in the boardroom. So if we, as a race, had more representation on boards, whether it's corporate boards, whether it's endowment fund boards, whether it's pension fund boards, that's where the asset allocation decisions are made. So we really need more representation kind of at the center of power where the major decisions are made.
Why isn't performance good enough? I mean, we were talking about your industry. It really should be just black and white on the page, right? Are your numbers going up or down? Why isn't that good enough?
The thing that attracted me to this money management business is that, first of all, money is green, and that you mark to market every night. So there is no judgment involved. The numbers speak for themselves. You're either very good or you're not very good. So that should be the only measure. What you can achieve, what you can do. You mark the market every night. And what's been really surprising to me, and this is true with other, I would say, minority-owned, and especially African-American-owned investment firms, is you can do that. It's very quantifiable. It's not judgmental. And yet, we don't gain a fair share of that $69 trillion out there of assets to be managed.
And let's talk about assets that are managed by African Americans. A 2019 study found that firms owned by minorities and women effectively have to work 10 times as hard for assets. Is there a stigma with trusting minorities with managing money? In other words, if, as Anne-Marie pointed out, your numbers are solid and you're outperforming your competitors, shouldn't that be enough for you to win business opportunities ahead of other firms that may be not as diverse as your own, for example?
Yeah, it's really, I would say, alarming that this situation exists. There are many African-American-owned, minority-owned investment management firms with long-term stellar track records, investment performance. That should be the measure. And, of course, the quality of your people, and there's a whole list. But there are many African-American and minority-owned firms that meets all of those standards, and yet they don't get a fair shot. And in many of the major pools of money, there are gatekeepers. They're called consultants to these major pools of money. And they have one of, you might say, their standard list. And in most cases, minority firms are not on that standard list that they take around from one client to another client. So in order to kind of break in the door, you have to have some other mechanism. You have to be able to access the systems directly, which has been our approach, because through the normal vetting process, we're not on the list. And it's really amazing, and it's true of other minority-owned firms. It's a shame.
Eddie, before we let you go, I just want to sort of ask you, you said that your firm has maintained a pretty low profile and you've been successful and you figured this is the time to kind of use that currency and you wrote this op-ed. I just want to get your overall view of what you're seeing happening now, the protests that you're seeing in the streets, the diversity in the people that are taking to the streets, the pledges that we're hearing from companies, and the changes that we're seeing in the business world. Just overall, what's your take on what you're seeing?
Well, my take is that this time is different. As you said, it's multiracial, it's multi-generational, and it has been persistent. We are very much in alignment with this. Our firm is, we are personally, and we say maybe, just maybe, we may have a shot at making some change. And that's why we were willing to step forward. As I said, use whatever goodwill and currency that we have stored up all these years and expend some of that to get behind Black Lives Matter, to get behind all of these great peaceful protests.
Mr. Eddie Brown, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate your time. I know you're a busy man.
Thank you.